Good evening. Thank you for joining our Ward 3 budget information session. Thank you to Councillor Fonseca for hosting this session. I'm Rob Schwartha, the Director of Strategic Communications for the City of Mississauga, and I'll be your moderator for this evening's session. Please note that we are recording tonight's event, and a copy will be posted on the city's budget website at mississauga.ca/budget. During today's session, you will have the opportunity to ask questions and hear from our senior leaders about the city's proposed 2025 budget. With us today are my colleagues Marissa Chu, the Director of Finance and Treasurer and Chief Financial Officer, Sam Rogers, Acting Commissioner of Transportation and Works, Jody Robelos, Commissioner of Community Services, Emma Calvert, Acting Director of Infrastructure Planning and Engineering Services, and Giorgio Fethnos, our Director of Enforcement. It's my job to keep this conversation moving smoothly and to make sure we get to hear all of your questions and have as much discussion as possible. But before we get into the questions, I will invite Councillor Chris Fonseca to say a few words. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Rob. Good evening, everyone. Wanted to say thank you for taking the time out of your very busy lives to attend the Ward 3 Budget Virtual Town Hall this evening. I do want to say a thank you to Mayor Carolyn Parrish for working with our budget chair, Councillor Brad Butt, all of council, and a really great thanks to city staff, not only the staff that are here this evening, who you will have the opportunity to hear more from if you have questions posed to them for taking their time out of their busy schedules to attend this evening, but also for the preparation of the proposed 2025 budget and also 2025 to 2028 proposed business plan to residents, businesses, and organizations. Since I was first elected in 2010, I have remained committed to your request as residents to offer opportunities to all of you in Ward 3 to be able to ask questions, raise concerns, or provide feedback and ideas on the city and regional budget processes and actual budget operating and capital budgets. And I have taken steps every year to ensure that you have that opportunity. And tonight is another opportunity to do so. My priorities and commitments remain to listen to you, to be respectful and responsible with your tax dollars, and to prioritize them, to optimize, and to continue to provide you the everyday services, supports, and programs that fall within our responsibilities as elected officials at the municipal and regional order of government, to continue to maintain, sustain, and protect the infrastructure and green spaces and our neighborhoods in Ward 3 and throughout our city, and to collaborate and coordinate with the federal government and provincial governments, our school boards, and external stakeholders, of which there are many, to really spend every dollar of your tax dollars wisely on essential services and forward-looking investments that are going to benefit all of you, all ages and generations, and from all backgrounds in Ward 3 and residents and businesses in our city. And I recognize that this is a really challenging task, and I cannot underscore this year the pressures that are placed upon everyone. It is a challenge, and I am open to listening and learning from all of you. It is also my responsibility to advocate for you, all of you, and to remind other orders of government and stakeholders to be respectful of the property tax. The property tax is not a catch-all for responsibilities that fall really to all of us. Yes, we need to carry the load as property taxpayers and municipal order and regional orders of government, but so too do the provincial elected officials and federal elected officials and other stakeholders. The City of Mississauga must continue to advocate, and the Region of Peel must continue to advocate for our fair and equitable share of tax dollars and funding from all orders of government to ensure that the needs of all of you are being met. And just quickly before I pass it back to Rob, who's going to then pass it to Marissa to walk through an overview of the 2025 budget, I do want to just touch on really quickly some of the commitments that are reflected in this 2025 budget, proposed budget for Ward 3. One is protecting, enhancing our green spaces in our ward that I've heard from you, and our park spaces, Galeden, Bermondale Park, Bethesda, Forest Glen, just to name a few. They're reflected in the budget, and I do want to say thank you to all of the residents who have constantly committed their time to planting trees and being stewards of our parks, trails, and creeks. A youth hub at Glen Forest High School that will be designed in a collaborative way for youth, by youth, and working collaboratively with departments in our city, the region, and hopefully the province, to ensure that the needs of young people in our ward are being met. Free transit for seniors and children and youth under 12, and stable My Way fares, another request that I've heard from Ward 3 residents, and commitment to continuing to build and construct and listen to all of the residents with regards to connectivity along the Dundas BRT. A motion approved in principle by Councillor Kovac and myself with regards to windrow clearing straight across the city to help ease the burden of residents with regards to snow removal with wet weather events. A commitment to seeing through completion of integrated road plot projects in Ward 3 and throughout our city, with regards to and underscoring safety for everyone in the community, and also committing to protect our residents and businesses from the increasing impacts of extreme weather events. The storms this past summer were a stark reminder that we have to continue to invest in this infrastructure. And in response, we have introduced, and thank you to all of the staff and council and the mayor for sticking to a commitment and a strategy to introduce a residential compassionate flood relief grant program, basement flooding prevention rebate program, and specific strategy to address flooding in Ward 3, along with the Little Etobicoke Creek review and Dixie Dundas flood mitigation strategy. I hope that everybody will be attending our flooding session that's going to happen citywide on Wednesday, November 13th at the Living Arts Center from 6:30 to 9. And also, before I hand it back to Rob, I want to say that there is another opportunity for all of you to attend an additional virtual budget session, which is a citywide one, Wednesday, November 20th from 7 to 8:30. So thank you again, and back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fonseca. I'll now turn it over to Marissa Chu, our Director of Finance, Treasurer, and CFO, who will share some more details about the 2025 budget. Marissa, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rob, and good evening, everybody. I would like to start by thanking Councillor Fonseca for hosting the session this evening and providing us with an opportunity to discuss the 2025 budget. So the City of Mississauga's 2025 budget book was released last Tuesday, and it outlines how and where the city plans to allocate its resources to meet our service expectations for the coming year. It also outlines the city's property tax levy requirements next year, and you can also access the budget book by clicking our budget document tile through the mississauga.ca/budget link. And the budget not only outlines the 2025 operating budget, but it also talks about the 3-year operating forecast for the next 3 years, as well as the city's capital budget and 10-year capital plan. And just as a reminder, under the Municipal Act, the city cannot budget a deficit, and we must present what we call a balanced budget. So under the Strong Mayor's Powers legislation that came into effect last year, the mayor is responsible for tabling the budget for council consideration, or she may choose to delegate the budget preparation responsibilities. And for this year, Mayor Parrish did direct staff to prepare a staff recommended budget and to also consult with our budget committee throughout the process. So although the mayor has delegated the draft budget responsibilities, the mayor's budget timeline still applies. So staff will be delivering a number of service area presentations at the upcoming November 18th and 19th budget committee meetings to explain our budget changes and requirements. And then council will have the opportunity to propose any budget amendments on November 27th at our council meeting. For 10 days thereafter, the mayor could choose to veto any proposed amendments, and then council has up to 15 days to vote to override any mayoral vetoes, and they may also choose to shorten these periods. And the resulting budget we are expecting to be adopted before the end of this calendar year. So in these two graphs that you see before you, they highlight the allocation of property taxes that the city collects. So the Mississauga residents and businesses' property taxes are impacted by two budgets. The first budget is the City of Mississauga's budget as a lower tier municipality, and also the Region of Peel's budget as the upper tier municipality. And our presentation today is focused on the City of Mississauga's portion of the budget changes. And for every dollar that we collect through our property tax bill, only 37 cents goes to the City of Mississauga, 47 cents goes to the region, and roughly 16 cents of that dollar goes towards public education. And that's why when we speak about the city's portion of the tax bill impact, it is calculated based on 37% of our budget increase. And last year, council had proposed a net operating budget of $682 million. And this year, we're forecasting a $53 million budget increase to $735 million. And that's our proposed budget. And due to the inflationary impacts of labor and supplier costs, we are proposing a $14.7 million increase to offset impacts relating to maintaining existing service levels. And we're also identifying a $1.3 million cost savings and efficiencies across service areas, as well as a 0.6% assessment growth to offset these budget pressures. We are proposing a $12.5 million budget increase to fund new initiatives, and I will go into a bit more detail around those new initiatives in the next few slides. We are also recommending a continuation of our 3% capital infrastructure and debt repayment levy and a 1% public safety fire program levy. And this brings us to our proposed budget increase of 7.2%. And as I mentioned earlier, prorated by 37%, our tax impact will be 2.7% on the city portion of the tax bill and 1.8% on the industrial commercial tax bill. So on the average residential home, this translates to a tax bill increase of roughly $184 on the city's portion of the taxes. And just today, the Region of Peel actually released their budget as well, and they are proposing a 12.5% budget increase with a 5.5% tax impact. For more information about the Peel's budget changes, you can visit budget.peelregion.ca. And as you can see in the chart, around 57% of the city's revenues come from property taxes, as it is the main revenue tool for the city, and the Municipal Act does restrict our ability to raise revenues through other means. And you'll see that 18% comes from our user fees and about 9% comes from provincial funding and other transfers, and the remainder comes from other revenues like interest, dividends, and other recoveries. And this chart shows a breakdown of the $14.7 million net budget increase relating to maintaining the city's current service levels. Around 4% relates to labor, and that's mainly attributed to our recent labor agreement negotiations, as well as impacts from an in-year 2024 transit service expansion. And there's also an $8.8 million or 1.3% increase relating to inflationary impacts, as mentioned earlier, and that relates to a combination of our winter maintenance, fleet, streetlight maintenance, and other contractor and utility costs. And the last two rows on this chart represent the offsets to our budget increase. So this includes our revenue increases that we're expecting from our transit, parks and recreation, and other fees and charges. And last but not least, we are also ending our 10-year Emerald Ash Borer levy, and hence there will be savings from that, as well as around $4.8 million coming from increases in our provincial gas tax transfers. So as I mentioned earlier, about a quarter of our 2025 budget increase relates to our new initiatives. And a portion of that relates to initiatives that actually improve the safety of our city. So this includes addition of about 30 bylaw enforcement officers, FTEs in 2025 in response to increases in service demands. And there will also be additional 22 animal service officer FTEs to maintain and improve service delivery, as there have not been any staff additions in that area in the last 15 years. And lastly, due to the opening of Fire Station 124 and other new stations in the last few years, we are proposing 20 additional firefighter FTEs for 2025, along with a few other positions in emergency vehicle technicians, training officers, and communication officers. And some of these positions will be funded through the 1% Public Safety Fire Program special levy. And Transit is also proposing an 8% service expansion by adding 120,000 service hours to improve capacity on our major routes, resulting from anticipated increases in ridership. And this budget increase includes 153 FTE increase of our new transit operators, maintenance positions, and other systems and enforcement staff. And you can see here the breakdown of our capital budget by service areas on the left, with roads, transit, parks, forestry, and environment consuming the majority of our capital budget. And in terms of funding source, about 45% of the capital budget does come from our tax reserve funds, and the rest comes from our DC reserves funds and other reserves funds. And this slide provides you with the overview of the City of Mississauga capital projects that are commencing in 2025. And note that many of these, if not all, are multi-year projects, which means they will be carried out over the next few years. And as I've mentioned, our public safety fire program was approved 5 years ago, and it is a 1% special levy that's planned for each year until 2027. And it's used towards both capital and operating costs of our fire stations. And the capital infrastructure and debt repayment levy was also approved around in 2011, so a number of years ago, and we had increased the levy from 2% to 3% in the last 2 years. And this is necessary to help ensure the city has sufficient funding to keep our $18.5 billion in capital assets in a state of good repair, and also to help support our city's capital projects. And as Councillor Fonseca has mentioned in her introduction earlier on, there will be a couple of decisions that Council need to make in the upcoming November 18th and 19th budget committees. And these are listed here, and they may also impact our budget position for 2025. And this is our last slide, and it's relating to the Peter Gilgan Mississauga Hospital. So at a recent council meeting, council has unanimously voted to decline the $450 million local share contribution request from Trillium Health Partners to fund development of the new Peter Gilgan Mississauga Hospital. So the city is now engaging in a public awareness and information campaign to explain our position around this local share request. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions along with the commissioners and directors on this call. Back to you, Rob.
Thanks very much, Marissa. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we get into those questions. I'd ask that you try to keep your preamble short and get right to the question as quickly as possible. Try to tie your question as best you can to the city's budget. Staff are here to provide answers, but we're not trying to get into a lengthy discussion tonight. So if you need further clarification or want to have a follow-up conversation, we can arrange for that offline. I'm going to alternate between questions typed in the chat box from those residents, and then also those residents who wish to ask a live question. And if you want to ask a live question, please raise your virtual hand. We will then unmute you and get you to ask your question. And if you're calling in from a phone, please press *3 to raise your hand. And if you don't feel comfortable asking a question live, you can type it into the chat box and I will read it and staff will give an answer. And so with that, I think I will open the floor to questions and see if we have any questions from those online. If anybody would like to ask a question, please raise your virtual hand and we will unmute you. So far, I do not see anybody raising their hand or asking any questions. Are there any questions in the chat box? Not seeing any of those either. Perhaps I will ask one more time. If anybody has any questions who are online, if you would like to raise your hand. There was a question that says, is there a citywide meeting happening or has it already happened? From Kim. Over to you, Marissa.
Sure. Thank you, Kim. So we are hosting a citywide teletown hall on November 20th in the evening. So it has not happened yet. And we will be communicating that through social media and through the city's website as well.
I should add that we will also be calling numbers across the city that are Mississauga based, that we know are Mississauga based, to ask them, invite them to join the teletown hall meeting as well. So look for a phone call. If you don't receive one, you can also go on mississauga.ca/budget and register to be part of that town hall. I am not seeing any other questions. I'm just looking at the list of attendees. Does anybody else have a question? Can you tell us about some of the projects that will be funded in the budget that will support the Ward 3 community? Perhaps I will maybe look to Marissa to start and then over maybe to Councillor Fonseca.
So thank you for the question. So there are definitely projects funded in the budget that will support Ward 3. They are outlined in the budget book, and perhaps it's difficult to speak to all of them just off the top of my head, but we can definitely provide you with those projects offline if you provide us with your information. So yes, we can certainly speak to some of them, and I'm not sure if others have specific details, but yeah, we can definitely provide that after the call.
Councillor Fonseca, did you want to add?
For sure. Thank you, Marissa. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we can send and be more concise about some of the project in Ward 3, but I did speak to in my opening remarks and on my website. It shows that there's commitment to, first off, a number of parks projects. For example, Gleeden Park, it's a full redevelopment of that park. There are funds committed in the budget to that, the final stages of that. Also, Bermondsdale Park is another one, and a number of other parks where there's commitments within the budget. Also, with regards to the Glen Forest Hub, and that's was referenced in Marissa's presentation, that is a commitment within the overall budget for Ward 3, as well as also, as you've heard, anyone that attended my the flooding meeting, and thank you to the staff that are on today that maybe could speak a little bit further to it, but there's a commitment within the 2025 budget to address the flooding that has happened within Ward 3 specifically. Of course, there is the citywide compassionate flood relief grant and basement flooding prevention rebate that will be coming forward, but specific to Ward 3, there's a number of commitments along with regards to the Dixie Dundas flooding strategy, but also the Little Etobicoke Creek Riverine review. Not sure if anyone on staff wants to speak further to that. So those are a number of specific items or a number of specific commitments within Ward 3, but there are others as well, and I'm happy to make sure that I list them specifically on the on my website, or a follow-up offline with anyone that has any questions.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Jody Robolos, the Commissioner of Community Services, had a few points to make, and I think Sam Rogers as well. So Jody, over to you.
Thanks, Rob, and thanks, Kim, for asking some questions. I think what's important to remember, Councillor Fonseca did a great job at highlighting some of the new initiatives and programs, but a lot of times in our capital budget as well, we really have to focus on state of good repair. So I can tell you within the Ward 3 community, there's a number of trails that are going to be redeveloped in 2025, playground redevelopments, sport court redevelopments, and that's really to make sure that we maintain our infrastructure. I will give a special shout out to Galeden Park. I was there today, had an opportunity to check in with the contractors, so it's looking fantastic, and we're really excited to have that park open for summer next year. And there's a great website as well. So if any of our projects, if you hear about as projects are underway, you can go to the city's website. I find the easiest way to do it, I googled Galeden Park, and it brings me up a picture of the park and what's happening and all the amenities that are going to be put into the park. So in addition to the new infrastructure, we have a lot of infrastructure in Ward 3 that we're going to be addressing in terms of upgrading next year. So thanks, Rob. Back to you.
Yeah, and over to you, Sam.
And thanks for the opportunity to speak, Councillor, and for the question. So from a transportation works perspective, as Councillor Fonseca already mentioned, there are a lot of Ward 3 specific initiatives in the budget. But to Commissioner Robolos's point, a lot of our budget is really focused on maintaining a state of good repair in all of our road and transit infrastructure, and that really crosses ward boundaries. So I would encourage anybody looking at the budget book to, yes, certainly look at it from a ward specific perspective, but when you think about critical infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit more about storm, you certainly need to think about it from a citywide perspective. And so on the transit front, as Councillor Fonseca mentioned and Marissa in her opener, we are recommending an 8% increase to our transit budget this year. And a big piece of that is going to be about increasing our frequency on, almost half of our routes throughout the network. And obviously Ward 3 will benefit a great deal from that. Moving over to the roads and stormwater infrastructure, that's obviously been a massive focus of us in the second half of the year as a result of the flooding. I am going to hand it over to Emma Calvert, who's our Director of Infrastructure Planning and Engineering, to speak specifically about the Dixie Dundas flood mitigation project and the efforts that we've been taking at the direction of Council and Councillor Fonseca driving this initiative to accelerate that project and increase our resiliency. So Emma, with that, over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to speak here tonight. Thank you, Councillor. And if I could just maybe add to that, one of the key projects on the city's radar already started and continuing into next year is the Dixie Dundas flood mitigation project, which is really around widening and deepening the creek and expanding both the Dixie Bridge and the Dundas Bridge to allow the creek flows to stay within the creek and not to spill the banks and then to come through Ward 3 and south down into Ward 1. That project was originally estimated to take 10 years, but the city, following the storms this summer and council's advocacy, have taken steps to shorten the timeline of that project by 6 years. So it'll now be a 4-year project with an estimated completion date in 2028. In addition to that, we are undertaking some additional undertakings in Ward 3 along the Little Etobicoke Creek, which again, we can provide the details to you in terms of the specific projects, but both starting this year and into 25 and then continuing on the years following to do additional flood mitigation works within the ward. And maybe I could just quickly add too, in addition to the rebates the councillor talked about, we are also increasing our levels of service for operations and maintenance, for cleaning, for inspecting and cleaning out existing stormwater infrastructure as well, proactively, again, ahead of preparing for future storm events as well.
Thank you very much, Emma. Just a reminder, if anybody does want to ask a question, we have you have the ability to raise your hand virtually, as well as type it in the chat, and we will try to answer it here. I have 2 questions from Murray. We'll go with the first one. More of a comment, but I think I'll turn it over to Sam and Emma to potentially weigh in on this. Murray says, save money on leaf vacuuming by canceling the program. The crew didn't finish the work this week and they moved on to another ward. Sam, I don't know if you want to start by answering this question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Robin. Thanks for the comment, Murray. That is going to be one of the opportunities for council to consider at our upcoming service area presentations and at budget committee. But staff will be bringing forward a report specifically on vacuum leaf collection. That report hasn't been published yet. We're putting sort of the final touches on it, but council and budget committee rather will have an opportunity to consider some different options, and one of those will be to cancel the program. Another will obviously be to maintain it, and there'll be a couple other options on tweaking the program but maintaining it. So happy to see your comments, and I'm sure budget committee and ultimately council will take that into consideration for this budget.
Thank you very much, Sam. Murray has another question / comment that he has placed in the chat, talking about not spending money on narrowing Bloor Street East for cycling, suggesting that 1 lane for cars, trucks, and buses is not enough, especially during rush hours. You can count how many cyclists are traveling on one hand on the road. And so maybe, Sam, I'll start with you, providing a bit of background and an answer with respect to the Bloor Street Integrated Road Project and redesign.
Absolutely, and thanks very much, Murray, again for the comment. Certainly, the Bloor Street redesign project, as we like to call it, has received a considerable amount of attention in Ward 3. I will say that it is in our budget now. It is a funded integrated road project in the 2025 budget. Obviously, with some news, coming down from the province and Bill 212, there are some questions being raised around the status of that project. But for today's purposes and for budget considerations, that is a funded project in 2025. Councillor Fonseca, I don't know if you wanted to add to that or not, but certainly if I would just encourage Murray and anybody else listening to certainly go onto the city website, type in Bloor redesign. We have a very, very robust website with all the information you could ever hope to ask for about this project. We've spent an awful lot of time consulting with the community, revising, design alternatives, and ultimately selecting the one that we're moving forward with. Detailed design is complete, and the project has gone out to tender. So we're very keen to advance it and look forward to really constructing a complete street for all road users.
Thank you, Sam. Yeah, and thank you, Murray, for the question. And I know you've emailed me a number of times. I hope that you did attend. I believe you did. We did have quite a few opportunities over the last number of years, inviting residents to have their say on the Bloor redesign. This is a integrated project, and I have said always from the start, my commitment is to when the opportunity comes up to redevelop a road, whether it's state of good repair, well, usually when it's state of good repair, to be respectful of taxpayer dollars, to do the due diligence of coordinating and collaborating between the city and the region to make sure that the underground infrastructure work is completed first. And from there, then everything that's going to happen at the surface within the road right of way is completed following that, so that it is coordinated, so that we're not going back and digging up a road again and again and again, and also to get input from everyone in the community. This is almost 4.8 kilometers of roadway, and as Sam was saying, The commitment that I put forward was, number one, the safety of everyone. That would include motorists, that would include pedestrians, seniors, cyclists, everybody in the community. And that has and always has been my commitment with integrated projects, and also to be mindful of taxpayer dollars again. And yes, that is where things are at. The province has put forward this legislation, and keeping that in mind, I'm committed to, even though it is funded and it has been funded for quite some time, I'm committed to saying, okay, so we do need to hear from the minister, and the minister has been provided with all of the data and the due diligence that staff have put forward with regards to the redesign, and we're awaiting a response from the minister.
Thank you, Councillor. Kim had a follow-up for Sam, just to clarify whether the project's on hold or whether it is proceeding. Sam, would you like to clarify?
Yeah, and thanks for clarifying that, Kim. I mean, the situation's certainly changing a lot with the announcement of Bill 212, and that's moving its way through, provincial, legislation. It's not legislation yet, and each reading there are sort of new changes. So we are monitoring that very closely. My comments at General Committee were certainly that we were monitoring and pausing and not moving forward with awarding the tender at this stage. But it is a funded project, and it is in 2025. And so we certainly expect clarity from the province, next year, well, hopefully this year, in order to make a decision moving forward. So thanks for asking for that clarification, Kim. It really is both. We're monitoring, pausing in terms of not awarding the tender, but certainly moving forward with the budget and the funding and a plan to construct in 2025.
Thank you very much, Sam. Murray has another question related more to the Milton GO line with respect to, will GO buses come back on the Milton line during the day, Monday to Friday? And perhaps I'll send it over to you, Sam. I know we've done a lot of advocacy on all-day two-way GO on the Milton line, but perhaps you can speak to Murray's question.
Well, thanks, Robin. Yeah, I don't have much to add. That's not certainly not a budget question for council. GO is and as Rob said, it's an advocacy point. Certainly, two-way all day is something that council has advocated for quite some time. But yeah, I wouldn't want to speak any more specifics on that one.
Councillor Fonseca, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Thanks for the question. I think the only thing that I will add is absolutely we've continued to advocate, and thanks to staff in terms of advocacy. We did have a report not only to the city but also to the region on a number of projects that are transit related, that are collaboration and funded in part by and obviously two-way all day GO is not in place right now, but as far as other projects that are, we've had a presentation and an update, and one of the asks was that Metrolinx come and do a presentation, and I think that's really important that Metrolinx come to City Council and provide an update, and at such time as we have on our agenda Metrolinx coming forward, I will make sure to notify all residents, Marie, you included, so that you can ask questions directly to Metrolinx. And also, this is an advocacy piece that we can continue to bring to the province. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Just one last call for questions. If anybody has any, they can raise their hand or they can put them in the chat. We'll give it a few seconds here. But if I don't see any more questions, I think we're going to sort of head to the conclusion. And I don't see any further questions.
I just had 3 that came to me, Rob, if you're okay with that.
Yeah,
by
please.
Residents that are not on. I don't see them coming up, so I thought I would ask. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the first question is with regards to a thank you, with regards to seeing that the Emerald Ash Borer is actually being phased out. This is the wording of the resident. Can you explain or give an update on, is there continuing to be investment in invasive species strategies, or how is that that's the question that was posed by the resident, because Ward 3 has been hit by a number of invasive species, or is that part of the 2025 budget?
Jody, can I pass that over to you?
Thank you. Please, Councillor, please thank the resident for bringing that forward. So the emerald ash borer is a very specific invasive species that we have been dealing with for a number of years. And so the levy is ending. There's still some work to be remaining in terms of planting for trees that have been removed as a result of emerald ash borer. So that work will continue. But we do have, in addition to that, an entire invasive species management plan, obviously aerial spraying. Some residents may recall over the years we've done aerial sprays. We have consistently been measuring LDD moth, is what it, as well as other invasive species and caterpillars in our trees, and so are prepared within the budget to trigger some additional measures. And sometimes that's ground spraying and sometimes it's aerial spraying. It really just depends on the levels and the numbers that we're seeing. So we do have that in the 2025 budget and are prepared to move forward, depending on what we find as we do our testing. If there is additional funding that's needed, we would obviously bring that back to council. But what has changed and how we've looked at things is, we used to budget for that once every 8 years on a cycle, and now we're budgeting for invasive species management and monitoring on an annual basis. So thank you. We do have that, and I'm happy if the resident has any questions to reach out directly.
Thank you, Jody.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Next one is like a multi-part question, I think maybe to Georgios and maybe also to Jody potentially. So at one point, the city of Mississauga had bylaw enforcement officers, and I think as recently, this is coming from the resident, I think as recently as during the pandemic, that collaborated and coordinated through our parks and trails system that were on bicycles. Is that program continuing, and was it effective in terms of educating as it pertains to off-leash dogs, as it pertains to enforcement of feeding coyotes, and as it pertains to enforcing electric scooters on our parks and trails? So it's like a multi-part question. I'm not sure if Jody or Georgios wants to answer that.
Thanks, Councillor. Perhaps I can start, and I heard a few pieces in there. So with regards to animal services, with regards to that component, currently in our for the budget this year, we do have a budget request with regards to increasing resources associated to providing those services to residents within the city. So that is something that is forthcoming. We want to engage in more community outreach and really plug a lot of the programs currently that are provided by Mississauga Animal Services. With regards to security services and their enforcement within parks, we currently do have a bike unit that still does provide patrol and enforcement of our parks. And that's approximately 12 bikes, including electric bikes.
Okay. That's great.
Great.
So I have 3 more, if you'll bear with me. The next one is, I think it's sort of a comment or a thank you, but also maybe a question. This goes to, I believe, Sam. thank you very much for the updated transit shelters in Ward 3. Are there more to come? So it's sort of it's a kind of an open-ended, but I thought I would ask it because it's a thank you to staff. And I think it goes to you, Sam. Maybe I'm wrong.
Councillor, it does. Just to clarify the question, are you talking specifically shelters in Ward 3 or across the city? Because across the city, absolutely. We're investing more in our transit infrastructure, and that includes shelters. Specifically to Ward 3, I couldn't tell you exactly how many are on the docket for 2025, but certainly that is a big area. If anybody wants to look in our capital plan and transit in the budget book, we've got recommendations around improving our transit infrastructure, including shelters in 2025.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Two more. Cultural grants, I guess this goes to Jody. Can you clarify if the cultural grant numbers in the budget for cultural grants, is that coming from taxpayers or from the Mississauga accommodation tax?
Thank you, Councillor. So Council implemented a Arts and Culture Subcommittee, which ran over the summer, and it gave us an opportunity to speak to our cultural groups as well as our festival groups on a number of issues. Funding was one of them, but also process, dates, the use of Celebration Square versus other places in the city. So a really great opportunity to connect with council and our cultural groups and festival groups. So there will be a report coming to council on October 18th, which will recommend an increase to the culture and festival grants program, and that increase is recommended to be funded directly out of the municipal accommodation tax. So there'll be no tax impact as part of that request.
Okay, thank you. And the final question is I guess a bit of a two-part question again. I think it goes to a combination of both Jody and Georgios. Thank you to city staff and to you, Chris, for providing a number of meetings around short-term accommodation. We have very serious concerns that short-term accommodation is becoming a substitute for permanent housing. How is short-term accommodation challenges in the city of Mississauga being addressed in the 2025 budget? And a follow-up question, along with short-term accommodation, encampments are a challenge in our city of Mississauga. And in Ward 3, there are a number of encampments that have sprung up along the Etobicoke Creek Trail and the Cheechak Trail. How are we addressing this in the 2025 budget?
Thanks for that, Councillor. Perhaps I can start off with the short-term accommodation component. So currently the city does have a short-term accommodation licensing program in effect. It came into effect in January of 2021. The short-term accommodation bylaw provides provisions whereby residents need to become licensed in order to operate a short-term accommodation in the city. I would encourage anyone who's interested in running a short-term accommodation or has any questions regarding the licensing of short-term accommodations to visit the city website, as it lists in full detail what the requirements are to become licensed under the bylaw. Additionally, if anyone has any concerns with regards to a short-term accommodation that is operating within their neighborhood, they're more than welcome to call 311 and file a complaint, and a municipal law enforcement officer will be dispatched to investigate the matter. And then we'll report back to the resident on any findings. With regards to, I think the second part of that question was encampments. I can note that Security Services is responsible for enforcement of all of our parks throughout the city. Where there is an encampment that's currently in a particular park, they work collaboratively with our colleagues in Parks and Forestry, as well as at the Region Appeal, to determine the best and appropriate course of action. Which may include ultimately dismantling the encampment if it's no longer occupied, or if it is occupied, we work with the individual occupying the encampment to determine if there are resources that can provide them support for more stable housing. Jody,
Thanks, Georgios. Yeah, thanks, Georgios, and I'll tap onto there. So we've been working really closely with the region of Peel and the outreach team at the region of Peel to identify any place where we have an encampment, and we're working on a collective policy that would really help solidify some of these things. And the most important thing is it is a person-centric policy. We are trying to get people housing, and that is the primary focus. We're working with the region as well to identify locations that would be suitable for out of the cold programs and other programs within the municipality. And the region has you may have heard about some of the crisis that they've been dealing with in terms of asylum seekers, and it has really put an immense strain on the region's capacity to serve the residents of all the city of Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon. But we're meeting on a regular basis, and part of that, as Giorgio spoke to, is doing a bit of a risk assessment on every single location on an ongoing basis to determine, how we help support individuals into housing. I think the region has indicated that they're getting into a much better place now than they were even 6 months ago in being able to transition individuals into housing, and so they're not unhoused in our city. So definitely it's a societal problem. It's manifesting in parks, in public spaces, in private spaces, but we are working diligently with the region. And there are going to be cases where, there are concerns about where people are staying, and we're going to have to work to remove and move people into a better situation.
And Jody, if I can just add on there, if there are any safety or security concerns with regards to an encampment, residents are more than welcome to reach out to our Security Operations Center directly, the number being 905-896-5040, and an officer will be dispatched to go and assess the situation.
Good. Thank you. Thank you for all the staff that answered those questions that came in through to me. So thank you. Back to you, Rob.
Well, thank you, Councillor. I don't see anybody else asking any questions, and I don't see any in the chat, and we're coming to the end of our hour together. So with that, I will pass it actually back to you, Councillor, for any closing remarks, and then I'll close out the meeting.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a big thank you to all the staff that attended this evening, and for presenting your dedication in presenting and shaping the proposed 2025 budget. Also to Mayor Parrish and to all of council for the commitment to making sure that we have a budget put in place for 2025 that's investing in everybody in our city, and at the same time being respectful of tax dollars. I can't underscore enough that it is a challenge for everyone, and I am here and we are here to listen to all of you and learn from all of you. Thank you to everybody that attended this evening, and if you have further questions, please contact my office. Don't hesitate, or also attend the citywide budget session on November 20th. I think I have that date right. 7 to 8:30, which is virtually. And my email is chris.fonseca@mississauga.ca or 905-896-5300. And thank you very much. And I will pass it back to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And thank you to all the residents who tuned in this evening and who asked great questions. Just in terms of engagement coming up, we do have budget committee meetings that are happening on November 18th and 19th, starting at 9:30 a.m. in the City Council chamber, and as always, will be streamed online through the city's website. As Councillor Fonseca said, we're hosting a citywide budget teletown hall on the evening of November 20th at 7 p.m. And if you have any further follow-up questions you would like to ask, you can send them to budget@mississauga.ca. We will also be posting a recording of tonight's meeting online at mississauga.ca/budget. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time, and enjoy the rest of your evening.